Turkish Airlines presents Business Africa.
Welcome to another edition of Business Africa. I'm your host, Afolake Oinloye. The top stories this week. Angola hosts U.S. Africa summit as the continent seeks clarity in the wake of Trump's tariff and threat to end AGOA. Controversial carbon credits are Gulf states like Saudi Arabia mitigating or aggravating the impact of climate change on the African continent? We'll find out shortly. Amid insecurity, art has become a vibrant business in Goma, weaving together income, memory, and peace. Angola, as AU chair, is co-hosting the 17th U.S. Africa Business Summit with the Corporate Council on Africa. The summit comes amid global efforts to address trade tariffs imposed by the Trump administration.
For over 20 years, the Corporate Council on Africa has led efforts to boost U.S. Africa trade and investment through its flagship U.S. Africa Business Summit, a key platform uniting heads of state, officials and business leaders from both regions. Africa's mineral wealth and development potential continues to attract global partners, including the United States. In 2024, the U.S. imported nearly $40 billion and exported $32 billion worth of goods to Africa. However, trade between the U.S. and Africa is at risk as Trump's push for universal tariffs threatens to end the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. In contrast to the U.S., China has offered to drop tariffs on imports from all 53 African countries it has diplomatic ties with. At the summit in Angola, delegations from the U.S. and African countries will be hoping to strike similar deals and identify opportunities for collaboration across critical sectors, from energy and infrastructure to agribusiness, health and the digital economy. Angola aims to position itself as a continental leader and attract investment for key initiatives like the Lobito Corridor, a major project reviving the rail link between Lobito Port, the DRC and Zambia.
Joining us now is the President and CEO of Corporate Council on Africa, which has been organizing this summit for the past few decades. Floriliza, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Now, the U.S.-Africa ties has been under strain. How will the summit help to reset this dialogue, and what role does Angola play?
Angola has done a lot in its economy to open it up and to make the kinds of reforms that are attracting investment into Angola in many sectors, oil and gas, of course, but beyond that, agriculture, digital trade, etc. So again, we are looking forward to the summit there, June 22nd to 25th. And we believe it will be the first opportunity for the Trump administration coming at fairly high levels to meet with African heads of state. I think we have about maybe 12 of them coming now, or leaders from African governments, vice presidents, prime ministers, if not heads of state, to meet with key people from the Trump administration to talk about the U.S.-Africa relationship, particularly with regard to trade and investment.
How will the summit address emerging challenges and opportunities in the energy sector?
In energy, we've been talking about energy and the promotion of energy, both traditional energy sources, oil and gas, but also on the renewable side. And I think where we are now is people are focused on delivery. There is indeed a gap in terms of access to power and energy on the African side for people, for businesses, for hospitals, for schools. And people are looking at how can they deliver? What is that last mile in terms of delivering power to those that need it on the continent? And U.S. businesses are very much interested in the kinds of technologies that they can provide. We know that there are those as I said, the traditional oil and gas sectors, tremendous opportunities in that area, but also those who are looking at wind and solar, hydro, and we will have a number of companies there at high level CEOs and C-suite executives in the energy sector to have a dialogue about what needs to happen in investing into the energy sector in Africa. We'll also have people from the African Development Bank, Afreximbank, and other investors, Africa 50, who know that that's important.
Now, what outcomes are you aiming for, particularly the ones that highlight strategic projects like the Lobito corridor?
It certainly is serving as a model. It's not the only one on the continent, but it is serving as a model for the kinds of collaboration that can happen, first of all, across borders in Africa, regional projects, really a way to facilitate advancing infrastructure projects, because you don't want to go have a project like a rail project and then it stops at one border and then, has to start again at another border. You really want to look at how can you facilitate those kinds of movements and those kind of infrastructure projects across borders. So I think Lobito Corridor is really a model for how that can happen. And we're seeing that there are countries in West Africa that are looking at similar cross-border projects that are going to be important. And again, when you have a project that's like that, cutting across various countries, you can also then crowd in the kind of investment that can come in from major institutions, whether it's the World Bank, whether it's bilateral partners like the United States, and also from African institutions like the African Development Bank, Afreximbank, the Trade and Development Bank, Africa 50.
Floriliza, it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you.
Now to the Gulf states, where Saudi Arabia and the UAE are investing in Africa reforestation and land deals to generate carbon credits. A system critics say lets major emitters avoid real cuts. We have more in the following reports.
Fighting climate change and reducing the carbon footprint by investing in projects that aim to avoid or trap CO2 emissions. This is the idea behind carbon offsetting. Carbon offset projects are multiplying across the African continent. But while they sound like a win-win, these initiatives might not benefit the climate as much as it seems, nor the African countries where they take place.
There is a whole ecosystem around carbon offsetting that's very complex, and there are many grey areas that cast doubt over the efficacy of these measures in fighting climate change.
The increasing number of such initiatives in recent years is also a consequence of foreign involvement. Among the keenest investors in carbon credit projects in Africa are companies from Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. They buy land for reforestation or existing forests for offset projects using the tree's ability to remove CO2 from the atmosphere. Governments and companies can acquire the rights to emissions compensated in these projects through carbon credits, but these often come at a price.
There is a phenomenon of financialization of land and forest, meaning that the capacity of the forest to absorb CO2 is not anymore an ecosystemic or natural function, but it's really a financial product that gets exchanged on international market. And in this context, respecting the local population's right is often taken into consideration last or not at all.
Currently, carbon offset projects in Africa show no sign of slowing down their growth. The African Carbon Markets Initiative, an organization seeking to expand carbon markets on the continent, says that it aims for Africa's carbon credit exports to reach $120 billion annually by 2040.
Let's head to Goma in the DRC, where local artists are turning hardship into hope, using pains to build livelihoods, inspire resilience and heal. We delve into their economic journey in this following special report.
In Goma, Eastern DRC, painters still gather to pursue their passion despite conflict and hardship, even as most activities have stalled under the M23 control. With the tourism gone and art sales down, artists like Didier Kawembe now rely on few students who still visit their workshops. In Goma, people still come by, some pay to visit, because here visiting is paid experience. You come, look, contemplate beauty, and there is a price. So just the bare minimum. We are surviving on that. But to say that we are truly living off our art like before, that's not true. Before the crisis, art sold for between $50,000 to $5,000. Now sales have dropped, but like many others, Didier remains resilient and hopeful as he navigates life in a city under the control of the rebels. I'm depicting life in Goma for children who can no longer go to school because of the war, children who are displaced. That's why I painted the displacement. The child's drawing imagines his future. He wants to go back to school and grow up. War doesn't stop dreams. Quitting isn't an option, so artists focus on learning and adapting, creating low-cost art for the local market. At this point, we are less focused on sales and more on learning. And for myself and other artists represented in the gallery, we are doing our best to sell abroad. It's with those small earnings that we try to keep the earning here in Goma. Galleries and art schools support creatives, urging them to document the times through their work.
That wraps up this edition of Business Africa. Thank you for watching. For more business stories and the latest updates, stay tuned to Africa News or visit us online at africanews.com. See you soon.
Business Africa was presented by Turkish Airlines.